Hello.
Hey, thank y'all for coming out.
My name is coming through as Black Torch, which is the name of this Mac. And I'm not a super big Zoom guy, so either I can remain Black Torch or I can change my name. Let me see if I can do this here.
Hey guys, is there a lot of background noise coming through my mic?
It's not too bad.
Okay.
Are you like in a car or something?
Yeah, I'll be home soon.
Yeah, no worries.
Off of work.
We'll probably start a little bit closer to 6:05, by the way, if it's all right with you guys, just to give people some time to roll up.
Sounds good.
I'll be right back.
And there he goes.
Where is everyone today?
I'm gonna be so bummed out if people don't show up to this.
Yeah, this is a big name.
Charles said he was gonna come.
Oh, nice.
He's a big fan.
Epic. I miss Charles. Oh yeah, who's all participating in the game jam this week?
I'm excited.
I'm doing it.
Me too. Thomas and my roommate Scott, we're all gonna team up as long as they don't ghost me and back out at the last minute.
Then just make it yourself. It's fine.
I have if I make it, I don't even know how the heck I would do anything if I make this. I'd probably just DM everybody and be like, please let me make one with you. Ezra, did you say you're doing it?
Yeah, I'm participating. I'm pretty excited. I haven't done a game jam since, I don't know, it's been a little while.
I've never truly done one, so I'm excited.
I think it'll be fun. I think we should get a pretty good turnout.
Do you have a team, Ezra, or are you gonna do it
Yeah,
yourself?
I'm there's a guy who goes to another university who wanted to collab with me, so we're gonna see how that turns out.
Nice.
I know he doesn't qualify for the Steam dollars or whatever, but you know, I'll give him mine. It'll be fine. Hey, thanks for showing up, Alex.
Hi. Yeah, and Mike Roush, did you see Mike is here too?
Yes,
we're both here.
We're just waiting a few minutes for some more people to show up. Normally we're a little bit of a late crowd, so
yeah,
we're just gonna give people a couple of minutes.
Okie dokie. Nice to meet you, Ezra, in face to face in a flat square, though.
Absolutely, the Zoom magic. I'm really excited that you guys. I think I emailed Dant like sometime in December, and then he replied like a month later, and I was like, "Whoa!" I wasn't expecting a reply. So,
Mike, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, we're so thankful for you guys to be
here. We apologize for that. We have been busy for about 2 years solid, and it's been sort of this unstoppable force. But so our lag time, if you will, for response is pretty big. And Dant was knocking down our door like, "Hey, these guys seem cool. These guys seem cool. You guys should talk to them." And it probably took us a month to get back to Dant, and then here we are 4 months later.
So I'm glad we could connect. Sorry for the delay.
No worries. You guys have a lot of stuff in production.
We do. Where are you all located? Where is Auburn?
Auburn is South Alabama, not too far from Montgomery.
Oh, nice. Very good.
Just want to ask real quick, are you both okay with this being recorded?
Sure.
I suppose so, yeah.
As long as we look cool.
Yeah, as long as we
just like to put the meetings on our YouTube for people that miss the meeting.
Yep.
Right on. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Sure. You're welcome. How many people do we have in here? We don't use Zoom too often at the office, so I'm a little unfamiliar with how to see everybody. There's like you can do like a big view. Oh, there we go. Gallery view. That's the one I'm looking for.
Is it midterm week or something?
Very possibly. I know I had a big
It
assignment.
is.
Yeah, it is midterm week.
I was wondering where everyone's at.
Maybe doing that. That is the one problem with recording the meetings. Everybody's like, oh, well, it's fine. It's recorded. I don't need to go.
To be fair, I think we all do that with our class a little bit too. So
This is very true.
we're
Yeah.
in no place to judge.
Slackers.
Although if you don't come, you don't get to ask questions. So that's on them. I'm excited to ask questions.
I'm excited to answer questions. So
Yeah,
you all are part of the game group. Ezra, you were saying there's not like an
Yeah.
actual game program, right? But so you guys have taken it upon yourselves, so to speak.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of public universities are kind of in the stepping stones to getting one. I think a couple of Alabama schools are starting to get like game design majors, but we don't actually have one yet. We don't even have a game design minor yet. We just like making games.
Heartbreaking. We do now. We have just gotten, like, as of like this semester, a BFA in animation, which is probably one of the closest related. Or like there's that, and then there's also like computer science majors that have a lot of applicable skills. But
so Alex and I are so old that they didn't even offer that in any college on earth when we started making games, which
That's true.
I believe.
So what I'm hearing is we don't have an excuse.
I don't know about that. I do think it's probably harder to in some ways it's harder, in some ways to make easier to make games these days, I think. I'd imagine.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I guess.
to me is that it's like all these students that did get to go to a place like that where it has a specialized program, they are now our competition.
Yeah.
So
Right. That's true. I think, I think that there's so many more people going into the industry now that your skill level has to be so much greater than it used to be. That's the polite way of saying that Mike and I are just a bunch of dummies. We landed on our feet somehow.
it seems like that seems to be the consensus of like everyone we bring to speak. We're like, what's the secret to breaking into the industry? And they're like, it just kind of happened on accident, and it wasn't the way I expected it to happen. And there was a little bit of luck involved, but also perseverance.
Yeah, I guess that's basically how it happened for me.
Yeah, I think it was also when I got into it, it was like back then it was like, do you know how to operate 3D Studio Max? And I was like, yeah. And then they would give you a job. That's all it took.
Wow.
If you were a body that could function to some level in the games industry, you could get a job.
Now, didn't you say, yes, I know 3D Studio Max, but you didn't, and you went home and learned it that evening?
No, that was a different job. That was I did computer aided drafting before this, and my manager got fired, and I said, hey, it was Friday, and I was like, hey, I can do his job, just hire me and I'll do it for less money. And then I went home and I learned how to do AutoCAD in one weekend, enough to where I could show off at least that I knew what I was doing. But that learning how to do AutoCAD in a weekend, and then supplementing it led to my knowledge of 3D programs, which led to my knowledge of other things. So it was the stepping stone. It was the gateway drug.
That's cool.
I learned AutoCAD in high school, and I've forgotten all of it.
I really miss it. It's a great 2D sort of program. I guess it's a little more 3D these days, but not like SolidWorks.
So I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. I guess we kind of already did a little bit, but we've got some questions. So Mike, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you did do like a lot of the original art for like the original, like the WiiWare Bit Trip games, right? I was very curious about, I mean, that's such a distinctive, like iconic style. I was curious about how that evolved over time as like Bit Trip went from being, like this one-off thing to what it is now. And also like it's a very distinctive style. Is there any advice you would give to artists now for trying to similarly help their games stand out like that?
Yeah, we had just gotten off a Tomb Raider game, which was a completely different art style, obviously. And then we formed the company, and Alex was like, I want to make a game, and I want it to be this, and I want it to look just like an Atari game. And I was like, well, we have to go deeper than that. We have to give it something that, it has to have something that sets it apart and that is unique, that's just not emulating the Atari games. And so, like I was saying before, I did have the history of doing stuff in 3D. So I basically wanted to do a 3D representation with a twist of what an Atari game would be, conceptually even an Atari game, if in the future, if that style just kind of kept evolving naturally. And so the big thing there, and the advice that I would give an artist is always look for that one extra step that you can take to make something special. Make it stand out, make it be unique, and make it be recognizable. We actually won a GDC Art Award for Runner 2, and I was always blown away because we were up against Bastion. And
Wait, oh, that was Runner.
That was Runner 1. Yeah, not Runner 2. It was Runner 1.
The IGF award.
The IGF award, and that's what it always blew me away, because I was blown away by Bastion. Some friends of mine made it, and it was so gorgeous. But I think the difference was there was no real style like what we saw in the Bit Trip games before. Not as much. It's more prevalent nowadays. But yeah, I think that would be my answer.
That's actually tremendously helpful and really cool to hear. I wanted to ask, so you guys kind of, like, a lot of the kind of all of your titles that you guys have put out, they kind of have this reputation for being very simple and very addictive. It's like this core thing that you're building on. How was your prototyping process like for finding the fun with these games, and did that change? As I guess you couldn't kind of do the same thing twice, so I know you kind of had to evolve as the games evolved.
Well, prototyping, back in the early days of our studio, we used to be called Gaijin Games. So back then we were Gaijin Games. Back in the early days of Gaijin Games, prototyping wasn't really a thing. What did we allow ourselves, Mike? 1 week for prototyping?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically until we found something that we deemed as fun or could be more fun moving forward.
And we, when we started the company, we knew that we wanted to have a company. It wasn't just that we wanted to, hey, I've got a great idea for a game. Let's make a game together. It wasn't like that. It was, hey, let's make a game company. And what game are we going to start with? And so it was sort of like backwards like that. So because we did it that way, and because Mike and I had already had careers and families and whatever, we weren't willing to go without pay, like a lot of people might on their first project as independent developers. We had to get outside funding from a publisher. And so because of all of these things, there was no time, because the money and the scope and the time equation that happened meant that we had to move so fast. So when you ask about prototyping, that's why I kind of smile and laugh a little bit, is because there really wasn't much prototyping at all. So we would basically like,
well, you should also preface it with, we had to complete each of the games in 3 months. So everything was time boxed, which has its benefits and its drawbacks.
Each of the original Bit Trip games was about a 3-month development cycle. I'm looking through some of my old documentation here. And so, yeah, we basically prototyped as fast as we could. Does this seem like we could carry some kind of interesting concept with this? Yes, go, move on, make the game, kind of thing. I kind of got away from your original question. I'm sorry about that.
Also, I'd like to say we went into prototyping sort of knowing the hook.
That's true. And the other thing that we do at the studio with our prototypes is everything we do, and I'm sure this is not, rocket science to anyone, but everything that we do is like gray box or primitive shapes and stuff first and foremost. So we play the game with just these little dumb rectangles, and then if we can have a mild amount of fun with rectangles, then we can imagine once we get art in there and effects and music and all that there's much more fun to be had.
And strangely enough, the original Bit Trip games were just games with dumb rectangles and triangles.
They were just rectangles. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, but Runner was basically just a rectangle jumping over a square, and it was trying to figure out the integration of collection and music. And once we saw that that it worked, we just sort of exploited it.
So here's some of the original design ideas for, where is my thing? Just scanned on paper or like scratched out on paper for Bit Trip Beat.
It's awesome that you guys have that.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff. Here's the boss battle in level 2 for Bit Trip Beat, sort of diagrammed out, Back then, when we started, I had this idea. So I headed up the design side of things. Mike headed up the art side of things. And I had this idea that all of my design documentation should fit on one page only. And if I couldn't fit it on one page, I had to cut something. And that was largely because of scope, but also because I really like simple games. So so that was kind of fun to try to figure out.
It works better with small games like the Bit Trip with small mechanics than it does with some of the stuff we're working on nowadays.
That is true. Yeah.
That like kind of related. Like I know for the original, like the music intertwined with that very simple gameplay, it was like a big part of. It seemed like you guys got a lot of praise for that. It seemed like a lot of people like took that away from y'all's game. Was that very much like a deliberate thing? Like was the music being such a big part of it a core focus, or was that something you guys found a little later on?
No, that was a core focus from the get-go. So back when I was very early in my career at LucasArts, it was like 1997 or something. Parappa the Rapper came out, and that game absolutely laid down the trajectory of my career. I didn't know that it was going to. I didn't realize back then that you could make a game with music, just because maybe there were some before Parappa. I don't know if there were, though. Maybe in arcades and stuff. But that was the first game that I really experienced that was heavily tied to music. And it totally changed my life. And ever since then, I had wanted to make a music game. So at LucasArts, I was always pitching these music game ideas, and no one ever bit. Then at Activision and other companies that I worked for, I pitched music ideas. Then when Mike and I met at Santa Cruz Games, that's where we met, I was trying to do a music game there. And then finally, like when it was time for us to start our company, I was like, you know what? I'm doing this damn music game. I want to make a music game. And I always thought I had one music game in me, and that was it. And now 12 years later, all we do are music games, really. I mean, we've done a few different ones other than that, but mostly we are a music game studio.
Also, our programmer, and he was one of the third founders at the time. He left, but he was super into chip music, and so that was sort of the other aspect of the influences that kind of got us to where we were going. And then on top of that, we pitched the original game as one game. The original Bit Trip series is one game, and we pitched like a 2-year dev cycle. And our benefactor was basically like, why don't you split it up into 6 games and let's sell them individually, and then you can take 2 years making them. And ultimately it was a very wise decision on his part, I believe. And also, by the way, chip music, we found didn't hold very well for long amounts of gameplay. It sort of got tiring. It's something that I think I can listen to, but in terms of gameplay, so that's why the Bit Trip series originally was more influenced by chip tunes, chip music.
Right, than being actual chip music.
And then it's the same thing, like I said, with the art before. Take something, put your own twist on it to make it unique.
So with even from your early games, but especially in like Runner 2, Runner 3, you guys have these, and even Bubsy too, I guess. You guys have these crazy worlds that you have for your levels, and they're super memorable. I'm curious about why do you guys settle on something like Foodland for Runner 3? Like what leads to a decision like that?
I can tell you, but I don't think you're gonna like the answer. We literally sat there and we did a Google search for like the 3 most popular things that people search for on the globe. And it was basically like food, spooky things. And then I think that was,
and it was like machines and trucks and stuff.
Yeah.
Too. So
and so we identified it as sort of being like just iconic stuff. But also we're wacky, and with Runner 3, we pushed that wackiness pretty far into the macabre as well. And that may not have worked, may or may not have worked for us, but
I will say all of that, the environments and the world stuff, that's almost entirely Mike. For me, on the design side, I don't care as much about the presentation of to use the word wrapper is a little like diminishing of the worlds, because they're not just a wrapper, but like what I mean is like the wrapper on top of the gameplay. I don't get as involved in that. I just want like, hey, like when I'm talking to Mike, I'm like, I've got these design ideas that I want down. These few things are super important. These other things are not as important. Everything else, I don't care what you do. Mike often does the same thing with me on the art side. He comes to me and he's like, hey, these are the things I really love. These are the things I could whatever. And so like all of that weird, wacky crap, like that's mostly all Mike. And I think, you know, I wish that I could be as creative and silly in that regard, but that's he's got a brain for that.
Well, you can thank Terry Gilliam, I would suppose, because he's a major influence on all that stuff. So yeah. Find your influences and adore them.
Yeah.
Charles has a question after this, and I wanted to say if anyone else has any questions, like feel free to cut me off, because I'm just kind of going off of a list of some I thought of. But on that note, I wanted to ask, so Atari, huge influence, clearly. Are there any other just like big influences, games, films, movies that you guys have that may not be as obvious to the outsider?
I guess I'll go first. Game wise, obviously Parappa the Rapper, Atari stuff. You know, believe it or not, both Mike and I were alive before video games were invented. So, you know, growing up with the very first.
Maybe not me. Because
well, I guess
right?
Commercial games, I guess.
Commercial games.
I mean, like not Space War, you know, and like whatever they were doing in 1973, but like. The Atari was the first console that I had any experience with, and so that was very nostalgic for me. But game, you know, so the Atari era, Parappa the Rapper, Rez is a huge influence for me. Gosh, what else? I'm sure there are other influences for me. Those are maybe the big ones. And then outside of games, in terms of music and film and stuff that are also inspiring to me. Terry Gilliam, Mike mentioned that. That's like an overlap between Mike and me. And then I do like some weird, you know, I don't dabble as much, but I used to really like a lot of weird electronica, like Yellow Magic Orchestra and gosh, the names escape me. Well, Kraftwerk, of course, and stuff like that. And then chip music too. But Mike, what about you?
See, I was pretty different. I was like in Doom 3 clans. Like my whole background of games was came from basically my online experiences, and I started making levels for a mod called Urban Terror, which was really an amazing mod. And so I was into a completely different form of video games than Alex, and I didn't even really want to make games. This is going to sound terrible to you guys. I didn't really want to make games for a living. I wanted to do prosthetic effects in film. And so it was one of those things where at the time, the prosthetic effects industry was going away because of CG, and like all of the trade magazines and everything was like, just don't get involved in prosthetic stuff. You're gonna waste your time. So get involved in CG. And then, then I started playing a lot of competitive gaming and stuff, and that's where I got sort of my influences. But my movies, of course, like I said, a lot of Terry Gilliam, a lot of Monty Python. Basically, all I do is watch movies nonstop. So it's any film it inspires me. I will find a little thing in a film that I will talk to a writer about, and will kind of be influenced by that, and et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting because I didn't really want to make games either. I wanted to make movies. And so my college degree is theater with a minor in filmmaking. And I think if Mike and I had met at a different point in each of our lives under different circumstances, we'd be making movies. So I think for me, I really wanted to tell stories.
Yeah.
And the Bit Trip series, whether you get the story or not, it has a very deep story. And a lot of people have actually picked up on it, independent of any sort of like information that we have told anyone about, which I find really remarkable, because I'm trying to tell stories through gameplay. Mike is trying to tell stories through art. Our composer is trying to tell the same story. We're all trying to tell the same story through our different mediums. And so I think that really what it comes down to for us is we like to do that.
So I'm hearing the best way to succeed in the game industry is to not want to make games.
That could be.
Yeah, but 25 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
I had a quick question. First of all, it's really nice to meet you guys. I'm a big fan of the games. But I wanted to know, so you set out to make a game studio. You needed funding from a publisher. You reach out. Why WiiWare? That is where BitTrip started, right? Unless I'm misremembering something. Why did you guys go with WiiWare instead of looking for some kind of like standard commercial release?
There's a few reasons. One of which is we're idiots. And the market was much bigger on PC, and we should have done that instead. But the primary reason, though, was we had just come off of several Nintendo projects back to back, and we knew everything about Nintendo stuff. And so our programmer was very pragmatic, and so he was like, I want the least risky path. I know how to make a game on Nintendo platforms. And so that was one side of it.
That was the main driving force.
That was probably the main thing. I'm a console gamer through and through. PC games did not interest me, and they still don't to this day. And then on top of that, it was this little guy. This little guy.
Yeah.
Really did it. We knew that we wanted to make a Pong-like game, a paddle game, and you really cannot play those games without a spinner controller and have it feel correct. And this, because of it is actually so important that this is this shape. The curves of this controller and the shape of this controller make rocking it in your fingertips so easy. And when we prototyped moving a paddle up and down, and because we were like, well, should we hold the controller like this and like use it like a spinner? That didn't really feel right. And then, but once we did this, it was like, oh my God, you can't do that on the PC. You could do a mouse wheel or a mouse, but it was just like kind of, I don't know, there was something about it that was gross to us. And so it was like a combination of, we were familiar with Nintendo, not only the hardware and the platforms, but I had tons of contacts at Nintendo and a sort of a support group at Nintendo. A networking kind of support group of folks that trusted me and liked me, so that we could maybe get in some doors that would have been a little slower to get through. So we had all of that going for us. And then it was the controller and stuff. But, Mike, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's that was
The
primarily
only
why.
thing I had to add is I was always sitting there. I had just got the iPhone 2 and I was always sitting there holding it up, just like, why aren't we making games on this? I met a dude that made an app, which was just like a phone dialing app. And 2 months later, it was on Keynote being held in Steve Jobs' hand, and he had made just millions upon millions of dollars off of it. And I'm like, this is important, you guys. But that being said, we stuck to WiiWare for the duration of the thing, and I don't think it. In retrospect, you can sit there and go, "Man, that thing was kind of a piece of junk." That the best thing about the Wii Shop was the music, in my opinion, and that it's like that's it, and the rest of it could leave, or I could be more explicit if you want, but but ultimately it got us here, and like I don't even know, we're 14 years old. So whatever we did, we embraced it totally. We didn't jump off. We kind of became the indie kings of WiiWare. Of course, there was World of Goo, which dominated for a long time, but we were still in that sort of group, and I think it got us enough notoriety, which might have been worth more more than the financial gains, was getting the name out there big enough in the beginning to where people kind of knew who you were.
Yeah, that's really cool, because that's how I knew you guys, was on the top of the WiiWare charts, World of Goo, Bit Trip, and like Cave Story. I remember those games.
Well, don't forget the aquarium app. That
Oh
was
yeah.
number 5
You
for
could
like
not
50
thrown
million years.
Oh, thank you very much for answering that question.
Nope.
Yeah, keep them coming.
Yeah, that perfectly segues into the next thing I wanted to ask y'all, which was y'all have had some insane collaborations over the years, from an outside perspective at least. Like the Portal 2, I think that might have been my first introduction to your series, was the Portal 2 ARG. How did like Valve reach out to you guys? You guys also had a crossover for Super Meat Boy. Like those are the two first ones I remember. You might have had others. How did things like that happen?
That was for the potato sack from Valve. And I think they just contacted us and flew us up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And they didn't tell us why. Do you remember that?
They didn't tell us why, but then we got up there and they're like, we want to do this thing. And they're like, well, we'll give you full support over everything that you want from us. I think they recorded some music for us, some GLaDOS lines. I was like, hey, can GLaDOS say some stuff? And they're just like, yeah, sure, we'll figure that out for you. They are a very interesting company, because what I liked about them is that they just did it. Like they didn't spend a lot of time sitting around talking about something. They're just like, let's go, let's do this thing. And we're like, yeah, sure.
It was really interesting because, like I said, they didn't tell us why we were coming up there, and it was like that thing in the movie where like the evil villain gets you to his lair, and there's like a whole bunch of other superheroes or whatever there, and no one knows why they're there.
Newell.
And we were in the conference room with all these other developers, and all of us were like, does anyone know why we're here? And then Gabe Newell came in, and he's just started talking. He was like, hey, and here's the thing. And then he could see that we were all confused. And he turned to like his lawyer or whatever, that dude that was next to him, Mike. And he was like, has anyone told them why they're here? And he's like, I don't know. And we're like, no, man. And he's like, oh, all right. And then he told us. It was super weird, dude.
But we met so many great people because we went up there a couple of times.
Yeah.
I actually pushed the button that launched Portal 2 because it was my birthday, and we had the cake, which was an amazing privilege, I have to say.
And when Mike says he pushed a button, he didn't click a mouse.
Yeah, it was the big button. It was me and 3 other people got to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
That was great. And then the Edmund version, or Super Meat Boy with Edmund and Tommy, we live in Santa Cruz, and so does Edmund. So that one was kind of like, hey, you make games, we make games. He came to Santa Cruz games a lot before we really split. He was making Gish. He actually rented our old office at one point.
Did he?
Yeah, remember that old Santa Cruz games office in the very back? They rented that.
Oh, that Creeper. Yes.
Yeah, that weird office thing with the weird windows. But and so we just kind of got to know Edmund over the years and traded characters.
There's that's very cool. I mean, a Commander Video, I see him in a lot of indie titles, and I figure that's probably maybe a little bit more like your producer, like that's more like a decision as a company kind of thing. But it's still always cool to see him just make an appearance in all these different things.
We the concept there is kind of like he was sort of our indie character. If he's going to be collaborating with other games, we always want him in there because we're pretty loose with him in a lot of ways, and you know, it just kind of makes him more iconic if he can be sort of omnipresent throughout games. It's even better if we don't have to work to make that happen. So
I had one other collaboration that I just kind of have to ask about. How did Charles Martinet happen? How did you guys get the voice of Mario working with you for Runner 2 and Runner 3?
I have known Charles for many, many years. From back when I worked at LucasArts, I was invited to some of the Nintendo holiday parties, which were unbelievable, phenomenal. I'm a young guy, first job in the industry, testing games at Star Wars, right? So I'm flipping out. And a big Nintendo fanboy. We go to these events and I'm meeting all these people, and they're like, I'm sure you all have played Pokemon, and there's like this Bill's PC in Pokemon. Do you guys remember this at all? It's like a PC you can access to store your Pokemon. And I'm sitting there, and then this guy who I know at Nintendo's like, oh, that guy right over there. Have you played Pokemon? Yeah. That's Bill. That's Bill. And I'm like, what? And it was Bill Trinan. And so like that was Bill's PC. So I got to meet Bill and became friends with him, and then got to meet Charles and became friends with him. Just, I don't know, there's something about Charles and I just vibed. And so at all of these events, we would just like hook up and, you know, say hi and stuff. And so over the years, we just had this relationship. And then Mike was like, we need an announcer for Runner 2. That was nowhere on my mind, I don't think. I think that was Mike's idea. And then I don't know which one of us thought that maybe we could trick Charles.
I think that you mentioned it, and I was like, message him. We're just like, it's never going to happen. But he's just truly the nicest human being I've probably ever met in my life. I mean, he really is the sweetest, most boisterous and yet kind person. And, you know, he's done, his range is insane. You know, he goes from Parthenax to the super high-pitched Baby Mario in a sentence when he's talking to you, and you're just like, what just happened? But he's just wonderful, and he's so talented all the way through.
Mm-hmm. He's a lovely guy. I actually owe him a message right now, so I'm glad you reminded me.
Can I ask, there's some, I don't know, it's almost mythologized that the time that you guys made your first game, you know, the WiiWare era, and then all the way through to like Super Meat Boy, McMillan stuff, you know, ending with, I guess, the newest Isaac. A lot of people kind of consider that like an indie golden age. How much stock do you put in that? Is that something you agree with? Are things different now?
I can say a couple words to this. I think that the golden age, I think that I do view it as a thing. It doesn't mean it's no longer here, but what it was, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it was almost without rules. And we used to call it the Indie Love Fest. It was just everybody, it was like you were a small group of people, and then you found out, you know, in San Francisco, there was like a couple more dudes. It's like, you always hear this about, you know, like, you know, punk music, when punk started kind of cropping up, it was like, oh, we knew some dudes over here, and then we just decided to hang out with them, and then we you know, we had a scene, or any sort of scene that crops up. And so in the beginning, there just really wasn't, there was no like arguments. You could do whatever you want. There was a lot of really good communication. Everybody loved each other. It didn't get complex. And then like everything else, it gets more complex and lines get blurred. But I wouldn't say it was a golden age of necessarily gaming or making games. I would say it was more of a golden age of learning something new, finding new connections, and then sort of fostering that between everyone. Sorry, my thing I keep turning off my messages. I don't use my Mac much, but for some reason it will not stop.
I would say that, yes, I do think that that was the indie golden age. And I think that independent games are still made, for sure. I don't think it's as easy to make them and actually make money on them. I think it's easier to make them and harder to make money on them. Because back when we started, you could recite all the indie games. You're like, oh, have you played this, and this? Whereas now you absolutely can't. I read, this was like 2 years ago, I read, and so it's bound to have gone up, but I read that 200 games come out every single day. And so it's like, how are you ever supposed to get recognized and rise up, right? And I feel like when we started, we got into that indie golden age, but sort of late, frankly. Like, not very much late, barely late, but it is such a short amount of time. And so I do think that the creativity and the wonder and the freedom and the love that does come with indie games is sort of harder to distribute and market, which kind of bums me out. But it is harder, I think. And I look back on those days fondly, for sure.
Yeah, that does kind of something else I wanted to ask you, which I guess you may or may not have as much input, given that you guys got started in a very different era. But is there any specific advice that you may give to like aspiring indie or aspiring industry devs now, based on what you've seen, like the landscape change?
We do get this asked to us quite often, and it unfortunately it is a hard question to answer. I think that my best advice is, and this is sort of like a bummer. Some of this could be construed as a bummer, but at a certain point you have to think of the marketplace. When I think of indie games, I think of punk rock. I don't give a shit. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to make the thing I want. But part of me also thinks that you have to know your audience. You have to find your audience, and then you have to appeal to them. And if you want to make a piece of art, then make that piece of art, but be willing to have that piece of art maybe not be looked at or not played much. So it is like finding a niche. Even if you make a small game in 2 months and you find a niche of 1,000 people that play it, I mean, that could be viewed as success. And so ultimately, you want to make a thing. Ultimately, you want, at least for me, you want to make other people happy with your thing. Like that was one of our big goals as well. I want to make people happy. I want to entertain people, or I want to make an experience that people will enjoy. But I don't know, outside of that, it's a bummer because marketing is such a giant factor in games,
and much bigger now than it used to be.
And much bigger, and it's even harder to market yourself because there's so many games. And in the old days, you could go to all the trade shows, you could walk around with your game, putting it in people's hands, signing them up on your email list, getting them to follow you on social networks. Even that's harder to do now. So I don't know if I really have a great answer to that question. I don't know if I ever have, but that's probably the best I could come up with.
I think that's a pretty good answer. I think my answer would be to get a degree in making games and then make something. I don't think that folks are hiring in the way that they used to. That is to say, I think you need to be able to show them something that you've made, like tangible, real thing that you made. And that's because there are so many people making actual, real, tangible things that you won't stand out if you don't have something like that.
Well, also nowadays a prototype is a vertical slice, is really what a prototype is.
I know, this is the thing. For me, a prototype is like a bunch of dumb blocks that are cute to interact with. but we've had prototypes sent to us from prospective candidates, job candidates, and it's like finished games. And I'm just like, wow, man, how do you do that? So then it kind of makes me sort of feel like the only way to really like get into a thing is to really learn how to do it, then look to get into the thing. And if you're going to try to do like go indie, be okay with losing all of the money that you put into it, because you might make a lot of money and you might make no money. And I view everything that even that we do still to this day as a work of art. And I'm not super money focused, although I definitely enjoy making money. But for me, what comes first is I want to make this thing. So then I make it, or, you know, I don't make anything by myself as games. Our team, we all work together and we make it. But yeah, make is what I would say. Just make the things and then show people the things.
Also, I mean, here's maybe a little bit of advice too, like scale down. Like our games were small, our original games were small. We had 3 months dev cycles. So, you know, if we failed, it was not that big of a deal, where I've known of people that have worked for 2-3 years on a game and nobody plays it, and they want to, well, they're very sad, let's just say. And it sucks, because we have released some games that performed very poorly. And after you've worked on a game like for a long time, and it performs poorly, it makes you feel like, well, what did I just do with the last 1.5, 2 years of my life? For instance, Tharsis, which I think is a fantastic game, is just breaking even now. And part of that is, and I think it did well, and I don't care, because we just wanted to break even for the most part on Tharsis. But that is a game where, you know, we spent 2 years. During that 2-year period, I had 2 children, and the game came out and it did fine, but it didn't do great. And I don't even know if Runner 3 hasn't broken even yet. So I put everything I had, Alex put everything he had into Runner 3, and, you know, it doesn't pay back the initial investment that you put into it. It is gut wrenching. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. But that being said, you know, my thing is, if you do a lot of smaller things that are kind of cute and fun and interesting, and you can sell them for a couple bucks, you know, you're building your foundation, you know.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something specific I wanted to ask about Runner 3. I know after launch with that game, you guys introduced kind of like an overhaul of the difficulty system, which I think it seemed kind of like a response to some of the player feedback at the time. I'm kind of just curious about difficulty in general in your games, how you go about refining that, maybe what led to the altering of like adding more checkpoints to Runner 3, things like that.
Well,
I have a quick answer, Alex, if you want me to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something that happened in the Runner games that we didn't anticipate during the 5-year hiatus that we took for making the Runner is Runners all of a sudden dominated on mobile. They just exploded on mobile. And so when we were finished making Runner 3, which is much easier than Runner 2, by the way, even though people don't think it is.
They don't think it is, but
they don't think it is. But we didn't anticipate that sort of the viewpoint of Runners should be, and difficulty is interesting, because it's really, in this case, it wasn't difficulty, it was the turnaround in the level. Like if I work for 2 minutes and I die, I don't want to have to repeat 2 minutes of my life. And so that's what that's where we ended up with the other checkpoints, is like, hey, you know, we know you don't want to waste your time. You just want to get through this game. And it didn't feel great to us. We felt like we were neutering product a little bit, but at the same time,
Yeah,
it was necessary, I think.
and the thing for me, I think, is the industry changed between Runner 2 and Runner 3. Not the industry, but the consumer, the audience changed between Runner 2 and Runner 3. Whereas in Runner 2, people were ready and excited for a very hard, super silly, strange runner game. And by the time Runner 3 came out, all of their tastes had changed, where it was like exactly what Mike described. I want fast turnaround. I don't want a hard challenge either. I feel, and this kind of sounds rude, but I feel entitled to beating this game. And that was a lot of feedback we got from players is, I bought this, I should be able to beat it. And it's like, well, okay, I'm sorry, that's not the kind of games that we make. So we made some concessions. And that being said, I don't think that the changes that we put in were bad or really, neutered the experience overly. And I think that my favorite way to play Runner 3 now is with the multiple checkpoints and on the hardest difficulty. So it's much harder, but you have a lot of checkpoints too. And I wish that in particular, but all of us at the studio, I wish that we had realized that difference in players, because Runner 3, like Runner and Runner 2 were both million sellers for us. And we expected Runner 3, like our projections, we were like, we want to sell like 200,000 units or whatever. Like we're not sitting here going like, we had previous million sellers, this is going to be 1.5 million. We were still trying to be pragmatic. And it was like day one came out and nobody liked it or bought it. And it was really depressing and terrible. It was probably the best game we've ever made that had the least, at least I think it was the best game we've ever made with the least amount of consumer sort of verification of that fact.
which was a lesson to us of hey, like we have fans, we have some notoriety, and this sort of thing is still happening to us. Like, it's almost like it's, for at least on the level that we're making games right now, we believe that if we don't make a 9, then we're not going to find a huge amount of success with the game. Although our motto, much like Alex said, is we just want to make games to make enough money so we can continue making games, which really feels good. And as long as you can pay yourself, we're not really necessarily, and in hindsight, it's easier to say this, but we're not looking to just completely cash out and, make the thing that's going to make us 12 million, 15 million, $50 million. We're just looking to make enough so we can get to the next game. So, and when you live like that, it feels better. We also never plan, and this is probably a little bit silly, but we never plan to live off the sales of our games. We try to get some funding, whether it's sometimes internal if we can do it, or external. And so that sort of helps us. Our business model for a long time was make a published game, fund our own indie game, make a published game, fund our own indie game. And that kind of thing helps because you continue making games. And if you want to make games for a living, then you got to figure out a way of doing it. So.
For what it's worth, the impossible levels on Runner 3 were probably some of my favorite levels in the series, even though it took me so many tries.
They're not easy.
Those were so hard, but they were so cool.
I got past the first 3. I couldn't get past any of them.
I also heard Meat Boy Forever, which is, I understand it's a different kind of auto runner, but it just came out, and I've heard that they have had some very disappointing numbers thus far.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. It's a similar situation, I suppose, where they're a very prolific name that didn't have a whole lot of commercial success. But that's like pointless speculation. I don't know any specifics there. I did want to ask about, it seems like different platforms have different expectations. Like you guys have had, like BitTrip Beat had like a mobile port. most of your games have come out on all consoles, but originally it was just WiiWare. Do you guys do those ports in house? Is that like is part of your process like planning for supporting all the platforms from the beginning, stuff like that?
I will say we've got around 5 minutes left. So
Okay,
this
great.
might be the last question.
Yeah, I have to, and I have a hard stop at 5. I have to get my kid from school. Anyway, we don't do a lot of planning ahead of time, probably because we're idiots. But we do have the skills to release on any platform that we want. And so we sort of take it for granted that we will make our games on any platform. A lot of the ports that have happened have been in-house, but not all of them.
There's this, we had one year where we released 16 SKUs, which was a terrible year, by the way, but it was releasing a lot of games on a lot of different consoles.
God, that was hard. I don't want to be doing that anymore. Yeah. So planning for that, we don't really. But all of our development is multi-platform, and we have a multi-platform approach. So at least from the development side, we're pretty smart about building our games so that they can be on multiple platforms.
Also being ready to jump on, be a launch title if you can, really helps. So being sort of, I wouldn't say, just being proficient on all platforms. So you're like, well, I have a game and my game had moderate success. I'm going to try to be a launch title on the new, Xbox, X1, Xbox X. You know what I mean? Like just being there and ready to go.
What does that look like? Your multi-plat focus development. How is that different from say somebody who's making a game that they intend like just to release on PC? That's probably a little technical, but
the hard part is, you sort of have to romance whether it's Sony or Nintendo, and you have to go through some approval process. Really, the bummer about consoles is getting your games rated. It costs a lot of money. You have to do it in a bunch of regions. Whereas releasing on PC, it's just like, oh, here, send, game launched. And so it's, all of the requirements, Nintendo has pretty, pretty intense lot check procedures that you have to go through to meet. And really the amount of time it takes to do all that stuff, the adage time equals money. And really it's like sometimes it takes just months trying to just launch your game, and it's frustrating. But it can be worth it. It can be very worth it.
Yeah, it's really about engineering all of the stuff in compliance with the first parties. And if you don't have access to their development portals, which is also another trick to get, I think as long as you are an avid gamer on any of those platforms, you have a pretty good idea of what they will go for and won't go for. But being able to engineer your stuff with all of that, their requirements in mind, and then of course never hard code any button icons or any of that crap, make it so that you can just, with the flip of a switch, you can change the, all of that stuff. But I think by and large, you just have to be thinking in terms of sort of no platform, so that you can just make it for any at that point.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a question I've had for a while. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah, and I don't know if Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft have like any sort of student access to their requirements or anything like that. You probably could. Somebody has probably leaked them online.
It's kind of famously difficult to get like a Switch dev kit, but if you have like a first generation Switch, you can hack one together. That's not according to the terms of service.
Dude, I have 9 downstairs, man. I'm not even joking. No, we just got a shipment of 9 to my house for this project we're working on, and they are very intense about it. One other thing I will have to tell you is I really enjoy making games. It's a lot of fun, and you meet a lot of cool people, and like I said, didn't go out to make games originally, but I couldn't imagine a different life, to tell you the truth. Sometimes I hate computers. Like I just get so pissed off at computers, but if you take that out of the equation, I really enjoy it. And I believe Alex does too.
I do. What I like most about it is working with the people that I work with. We have ridiculous conversations on a daily basis, and I talk to my other friends who have normal jobs and my wife too about like, hey, do you guys ever talk about this kind of crap? And they're like, oh, come on, man. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we are a different.
My wife is in marketing, and I can't believe she puts up with that. It blows my mind. And if you're going to make a company or whatever you're going to do, make it with good people. We hire people for personality first. And I don't care if you're a rock star at what you do. If you can't get along and you poison the well, no bueno. And
this is actually this will be my last thing I say, because I got to duck out of here. I'm so sorry that I have to go right at 5, but I do. Making a game, it is not about you. It is about the team. It is also about the game. What does the game want? And every now and then, someone on the team, we don't encounter this as much anymore because we've been working with the same people for years, but every now and then, someone on the team will latch onto an idea that is genuinely a good idea, but the game doesn't want it, or the scope can't handle it, or the directors don't want it. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea. That person needs to let it go, right? And one of the things that I have found in working with people, and especially Mike and me, we have a really good work relationship, is the games that we make, none of them, literally none of them have met my vision. Probably none of them have met Mike's vision either, because the games you make with other people. And what happens is your visions start to meld and you get something different. And it may be better, maybe sometimes it's worse, hopefully not, or it may just be just as good. But the ability to let go of your own ideas when appropriate is so important. And the ability to recognize that other people have good ideas as well, or like one thing we say at the office a lot is, this is what we had or whatever. This idea is equally cool, but different. And more people want that or whatever. So if it's equally cool, just different, then throw this other thing away, right? Like, and so this collaboration, I think, is really where you need to be.
Also,
yeah.
Alex and I do this thing where, and Alex, I know you have to go, but I'll just finish up with this really quick because it's an interesting thing. If one of us is more passionate about a thing, the other guy just kind of backs off and says, "Okay,
yeah,
you're super passionate. Go do that. Let's do that." And we don't sit here and butt heads all the time. There's been a couple of things that we've butted heads over the years, but really not that much. And really, it's like giving someone else that space and the freedom, and that's how you start getting, good products. I think the juice, yes.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming out. This has been super insightful, really, really good time. Thank you guys so much. I will let you go get to your responsibilities. Thanks again.
Nice to you all, and I wish you all the best of luck. If you have any follow-up questions, just shoot them over in an email or something.
Absolutely. Good luck getting back into production.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys.
See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Eggs, cold eggs.
Harper,
right, so I don't think we have any other announcements or anything, right?
We've got the game jams, which the wellness jam, exactly 23 hours. So be back here at 6 tomorrow. Which Harper, I was going to ask, have the theme prepared.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of different themes written down somewhere that I can put on the the site, or well, I'll have to choose one, but yeah.
Awesome. And then
can you guys also like send an email out with the theme information and stuff right at 6, because I will be in class.
Yeah, I can set that up and everything.
Yeah, I'll be ready.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Right. Ezra, did they ever get back to you about being judges?
Yeah, they are not going to be able to be judges for this event. I am sorry. Right. I hope we can get more judges before the game jam is over.
That was super cool though. I got a lot of useful information from that.
Dude, Runner 2 is like my second or third favorite game of all time. Like this was incredible. And thank you for everyone who showed up. Like those guys they're doing something right.
I really like their they
Thanks
like
for reaching
one.
out.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, you're good. Sorry.
I really like their they've got 1 week prototype and then 3 months dev cycle, and then they just repeat and make another game. That seems like such an efficient way to just get crap out there.
Mhm.
Perfect segue into the game jam tomorrow.
For real.
Yeah, how are teams going for that? I haven't been like around.
What'd you say?
How are teams going for that? Are people doing teams for that, or?
I've heard a
The
couple.
game jam? I think
Yeah.
some people have teams in mind, and other people do not.
Yeah, you'll probably be able to get some team members at the kickoff at 6 if you don't have one already.
It'll work.
Mhm.
Unfortunately.
Alrighty, I'm gonna head out. Hey, thanks to everyone again who came to this meeting. This was really awesome, really exciting. Y'all take.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So everything
Bye,
happening
y'all.
with the jam is tomorrow at 6, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Starts
Okay,
at 6,
cool.
ends at midnight the next day.
Alrighty. I might be able to do this one.
Cool.